Welcome to Cambridge Chronicles. Just want to start with massive appreciation. Thank you so much for being a part of this, taking your time out. We all really appreciate it. We've all been really excited about it as well. And also congratulations on your knighthood as well.
Thank you.
How does that feel?
It feels a bit strange still, but I'm getting used to it. Some people overuse it, which is quite comic. But it's a charming thing, but one mustn't be get pompous about it. Apart from anything else, it pleases the mother. My mother's still in the world. Hard to believe someone as old as me has a living mother, but I do, and she obviously was delighted. So it's kind of you feel it's for her, especially given what a dreadful child I was. It's kind of repayment, if you like.
Brilliant. Okay. So I'm sure Tom's mentioned this all already. So at the moment, we're developing a documentary series about Cambridge. So basically, every episode kind of focuses on like a different person or a story or like a place in the city. And for this is about Footlights. Now, this has been a really exciting episode to work on because over the last month or so, we've gone and shot loads of like smokers events and all the stand-up shows at the ADC Theatre. It's great watching all the talent there and meeting all the members and kind of talking about it. There's so much, obviously, there's so much history to this society, isn't there? And there's so much talent that it's produced over the years. Now, when you were a student here in Cambridge, what was it about Footlights that kind of hooked you into it?
Well, it had never really crossed my mind that I would be a Footlights person. That we had the great Messiah hanging over us, JC, John Cleese, and Peter Cook. Those two, in particular, for me, were enormous childhood heroes. Monty Python, obviously Eric Idle and Graham Chapman as well were footlighters from Python. And then there were the later figures like Douglas Adams, whom I really admired, and earlier than that, Clive James, and so on. But Peter Cook was really the great hero and the founder of a new kind of comedy that John Cleese then pursued, and he, like me, was a huge fan of Peter Cook's. So I never thought I was in that class. I still don't really, and also, when you're at Cambridge, almost the first thing you hear at a freshers' fair or something, a squash or whatever it might be, is apparently the Footlights are really shit this year. It's just kind of goes with the territory. That's always oh, have you heard? Yeah, apparently the Footlights are shit this year. Yeah, terrible. And so you sort of think maybe it's not cool anymore. How could it be after Cleese? And then even after Cleese, as I say, there was Douglas Adams, and then Griff Rhys-Jones was just making a name for himself, because certainly by my second year, I think, Not the 9 O'Clock News was on, and that was produced by an ex-footlighter, John Lloyd, and there was a Griff was in it, and Mel Smith was Oxford, and Rowan was Oxford, obviously. So it just didn't really cross my mind. But it was Emma Thompson who introduced me to Hugh, because I'd written a play I'd been with the Mummers, and I'd written a play, had gone to Edinburgh and done quite well. It won a Fringe first, and as the Scotsman had these prizes in those days. I don't know if they still do. And it was a comedy, and Emma had been in the Footlights in her first year, and so had Hugh. Hugh had only been in the Footlights because he was an oarsman. He'd come up from Eton in order to row, basically, as his father had done. His father had rowed for England in the Olympics. And he got glandular fever in his first year. And obviously some Etonian said, "Oh, you're bloody funny. Why don't you go to the Footlights, So he kind of, "Oh, okay." So he did, and I happened to see that show in Edinburgh. I was doing a play with the Mummers, and I thought, God, they're good. They really are. It was, Robert Bathurst was there, and Hugh, and Simon McBurney, Sir Simon McBurney as well, funny enough, I think, and founder of Théâtre de Complicité. I'm sure you know who I mean. And so I thought, wow, and of course Emma was a goddess. It was just utterly brilliant. So I thought, wow, amazing. And then in my second year, as I say, I wrote this comedy play, and Emma came around to see it and dragged me off to meet this fellow Hugh Laurie, and we just got on instantly. It was extraordinary. We just started writing together, and it just seemed such a natural thing. We both shared the same sense of humour, the same sense of what we didn't find funny, or at least the same sort of sense of stylistic humour, as it were. But you have to remember that essentially the Footlights, I guess you could say, has three phases. There's the phase for the first 50 years of its life, really. Well, no, 40, 35, 40 years of its life, where there were shows with wonderful titles like Cheer Ho Cambridge, and it was Jack Hulbert, who's not a name people remember now, and Richard Murdoch, Stinker Murdoch, who was a big star in his day, and they were in the Footlights, and they did jolly things with boaters, and singing songs and being merry. At the same time, the ADC, Julian Slade was there. He wrote a famous musical in the late 40s, early 50s called Salad Days. And his review for Cambridge was called Bang Goes the Meringue. So fabulously, again, you can see the striped blazers and the boats.
So many creative names for that.
Then Peter Cook happened. And that was an astonishing thing. Peter, by his second year, was writing for the professional West End stage. There were reviews on stage, the Codron reviews with a very young Maggie Smith and others, and he was writing sketches for them. Here then, of course, with Jonathan Miller, and Jonathan Miller is now better remembered, if he is remembered, and I hope he is, as a director, a theatre director, but he was the funny one, really. He was the clown in Beyond the Fringe, which then, because the two Cambridge figures, Jonathan and Peter, then blended with Alan Bennett and Dudley Moore and produced Beyond the Fringe, and the satire boom exploded, and the end of deference and all the other cliches that adhere to that period. But it was, and then on there was a new kind of undergraduate humour. It was spikier and sharper, sketch comedy though. Still, it was reviews. There could be songs and music, but they were often satirical and occasionally just plain silly and delightful. And obviously, by the time it was John Cleese and Eric Idle and Graham Chapman and Tim Brooke Taylor and Graham Garden and Bill Oddie, who were the goodies, it had suddenly become this thing that the Footlights was big and it would transfer to the West End and everything like that. And there were figures like Clive James and Germaine Greer, Miriam Margolyes, it was the weirdest mixture of people. And I guess then what you get is momentum. So a young person who thinks they like the idea of maybe going into comedy, writing comedy, going to the BBC, being an entertainer, are more likely to choose Cambridge than any other university because they're familiar with the word Cambridge Footlights, just the phrase. It's a brand, I suppose you'd have to say. Oxford has the Oxford Review Group, but it doesn't have the same, obviously it's produced some brilliant people like Rowan, and Manchester and Durham and all kinds of places have had fantastically talented people. But Cambridge is the club room. It has a checkbook and a treasurer and even a don to supervise it. There was a wonderful man called Harry Porter who for years was the sort of archivist and sort of benign uncle who looked after Footlighters, and it certainly was there in our day. And of course there was the rhythm of the year that was the Smokers, which was so important because people would write stuff and hone it. And in so many other universities, they would say in March or April, shall we write a show to go to Edinburgh? Yeah. Donald, you write it. Mary, you write the music. And they haven't had all these smokers and all these tryouts and things to hone the craft of writing a sketch and so they haven't got they just sort of do one thing. So there's a huge advantage to the Footlights in that regard, I think. But it was pre-stand-up. So by the time I joined with Hugh and Emma and Tony Slattery, I brought Tony Slattery in because I'd done drama with him. I'd been acting before. I'd been in the ADC and the Mummers and Bats and things like that, and hadn't. But once I met Hugh, I was absolutely I mean, singer fell for him, and not romantically, but comedically, and of course there's a club room as well with the photographs of Peter Cook and John Cleese and everyone bearing down on you, reminding you what a piece of cheese you are. There was even a book somewhere under the bar of the club room that was a Footlights May Week review titles, where if you had an idea for a title, because it's the worst thing thinking of a title for a May Week review, you had to put it down. And there was one which made me laugh and laugh and laugh, which was Captain Fellatio Hornblower.
I'm loving these names.
Isn't that brilliant? And I thought, I bet I know who that is. And years later, I was having dinner with Eric Idle, and I said, Eric, do you remember there was a titles book? He said, not really. I said, there was a title. I'm convinced it's you. It's just so you. Captain Fellatio Hornblower. He went, I've completely forgotten it. I'm a genius. So anyway, but what there, and so when we went to Edinburgh in '81, which happened to be the first year that they had this comedy award, the Perrier Award, because comedy was slightly growing, because what had happened in the meantime was the very beginnings of so-called alternative comedy. Alexei Sale, the giant figure there, and others like Rick Mail and Adrian Edmondson were arriving, and Dawn and Jenny, and so on, were just beginning to do the odd thing, and this thing, stand-up, which had never been anything to do with the Footlights, and Hugh and I, when someone said to us, "Have you considered doing stand-up?" we kind of thought, stand-up. What's that? You mean, like, we thought, is that Bernard Manning, who was a sort of northern fellow who just told jokes, or it's the American thing? There are American stand-up comedians, we're called, but stand-up. And we sort of did a self-conscious, typically self-deprecating thing of, well, I mean, we're Cambridge undergraduates. What have we got to say? It's my fucking bedder was late last night. This morning. It's just, the most privileged lives imaginable. There's nothing to complain about, and stand-up's about moaning about the world. But there's something so ridiculous about a student with all the advantages of being at Cambridge, sort of bleeding on a microphone. Surely what you want is, come in. Perkins, come in, and you have a sketch. But when we were there, it was still, pure Footlights was pure review comedy sketches. And amazingly, there was one evening we were performing at St Mary's Hall in Edinburgh, and we were going really well, I have to say. It was wonderful. We were completely sold out, and we did have some very nice reviews, and we were, phew, what a relief we got away with it. Because, you're the Cambridge Footlights, you go to Edinburgh, you expect everybody to hate you. Because you're privileged and you're elite and all the terrible things, and you know perfectly well that if you hadn't got to Cambridge yourself, you would hate them. You really would. One must be honest about that. So you expect it, but fortunately we sort of got away with it. And not only that, there was one evening, as I say, we were taking our bow, and suddenly the audience went a bit nuts, and we thought, what's going on? And this person appeared in the back, and we looked, and it was Rowan Atkinson, who was now a big star. He'd been a star in Edinburgh in his own way, but then not the 9 o'clock news. He was the standout in that, and he came up, ladies and gentlemen, and he announced that we had won the Perrier Prize, which was a complete shock, and he gave it to us. Wow. And that involved a week in London doing a performance, but we also got asked if we wanted to do a tour of Australia. And when we got back, the BBC had meanwhile asked if they could do our Footlight show on television, which was bizarre. So it was called the Sellotapes. I can't remember why, sort of Bob Dylan-y thing, the basement tapes, and Sellotape sounding like sellotape. I mean, sort of a stupid title, but any title is stupid, really, until you're used to it. We did it on TV, and suddenly we found there was another TV thing we were asked to do, this time with Ben Elton and Robbie Coltrane involved, and in Manchester, and then there was Blackadder, and Hugh and I did our own show, a bit of Fry and Laurie, and we had our equity cards, and we were professionals, and it had somehow happened, and it's a mystery, but there's no question that just being able to go down to the club room, Hugh fiddle on the piano, I would sort of write things and chat with him and with Emma, and we would plan and fail and succeed and fail and keep doing it. And we certainly weren't the Beatles of comedy, but it was our Hamburg, if you like. It's just the way you practice and get tight if you were a band, And I think the difficulty now is it's the same with music, actually, really, isn't it? The Beatles. I mean, it's what Paul McCartney always says. Whatever you may think of us as musicians, there's no question that after the incredible experience of 2 tours of Hamburg, night after night after night, 4 times a night, doing different sets, when we came back, we were the tightest rock and roll band in Britain. There was no one better. We just read each other's minds, and we were brilliant. And same with comedy. The Footlights is such a huge advantage with the clubroom and with this momentum and this history and this rhythm of the calendar of a late night show in the Michaelmas term, and then in the Lent term, a panto in the Michaelmas term, and a late night show in the Lent term, and the May Week Review, and all the smokers in between, and. I fear, in as much as music now, it's much harder for a band to get that kind of practice. All they do is look at YouTube and then put themselves on YouTube after having rehearsed in the bedroom for a fortnight. And similarly with comedy, point the camera at me, I'll do a silly voice or whatever. And some of them are brilliant. Obviously, talent will, a sapphire will shine out through a dung heap. But the mixture of being with other people who are all slightly different and have different talents. Hugh's physical comedy was astonishing. His musical gifts remarkable. I was more of a verbal sort of figure, and so we meshed. And then Tony had his qualities, and Emma her staggering qualities. And so you each learn off each other, and you work together. And it's much harder to do that without something like a Footlights. Much harder. You have to sort of pull it together. So, imagine you're at, Warwick or wherever it might be, York or something, wonderful universities, but they may not just have that structure. So we count ourselves very blessed. It was a very long answer, Sam.
No, I loved it. That was fantastic. Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, and of course, like it was a bit, you talked a bit about that a second ago with how nowadays people can just put themselves in front of a camera and put themselves on TikTok or social media, and it's not... Yeah. It's not quite the same. You need to kind of be there in person and have that kind of atmosphere. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it needs people to realise. We old people always talk. I was a very early adopter of Twitter, and I only left it when Musk bought it because I just found it tolerable, and I had 13 million followers, and so I kind of felt really like, God, I've built them up since 2007 when Twitter started. But I've now, like a lot of people, feel that social media is sort of pollution, basically. There's the Industrial Revolution; it sent out steam, and people died of rickets and tuberculosis and all the terrible things of slums and of contamination and pollution from the soot, and that's sort of what social media does, and it's not up to people like me to say, well, we should ban it, and to go to Parliament and say, let's think about how we ban it. It's really got to come from the bottom up, and I think your generation is really understanding now that probably the best word to use about the social media is not to say it's toxic or it's wicked or it's just lame. Just standing around staring at TikTok and Insta, it's just pathetic. It's lame. Yeah. And I think people are understanding that now. And the joy of physicality and touch and eye contact and, even just, abandoning phones is kind of fun. And I think you see more of it. And I think that will help with music and with comedy. Because they're brothers and sisters, music and comedy, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm worried for future generations because I'm thinking like that what it's doing to their attention spans, especially like in schools in England. I remember seeing something a few months ago about saying they might ban phones for under 16s, and I think that's actually kind of fair to do that because if they're at that age, their brain's developing and you're constantly on your phone watching TikTok, that's just going to fry your brain, isn't it?
Absolutely right. Yeah. No, it's true. Do they ban them? They don't ban them in colleges. They wouldn't dream of it, would they?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
So, which is your college, by the way?
So I actually I didn't go to Cambridge. I went to Exeter.
Very
I've
fine.
lived in Cambridge. Yeah, I've lived in Cambridge my whole life.
Oh, I see. So
And so I
we
thought,
anxious to get away. You had to
yes, yeah,
the advantage free laundry at home, and you could nip home if you felt like it. But I set that against, as you say, all your life in Cambridge, somewhere new, as far away as you can get, like Exeter, which is beautiful. And they have a student guild, don't they? I remember I went to do a talk there once, and a very good film school as well.
film
Anyway,
school. Yeah, yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, no, it's great. I feel like I could talk to you for hours.
sorry, yes, I know I rattle on.
No, not at all. I do the same. So turning back to Footlights now, what would you say is the most valuable thing you've learned at your time there? Something that you think you still carry with you today and you apply to your work now?
I think the hugest advantage is if you are a performer in comedy or even in sort of music comedy or anything like that, is that it seemed entirely natural that you would create your own material as well as perform it. And it's, again, I keep sort of comparing it to music, but the reason why of my generation figures like David Bowie and Elton John are giants is because they wrote their own music. If you're just singing someone else's songs, you're dependent on good songwriters writing them for you. And it might happen, if you've got a really astonishing voice, you might get really good songs written for you, like Frank Sinatra or something, or Elvis Presley, who wrote Love Me Tender, but that's about it, and he didn't write the tune anyway. So, but and it's the same with comedy. The Cleese and Cook were geniuses, and Spike Milligan, and the really enormously extraordinary ones, because they created their own material rather than, and with Footlights you just think, oh, okay, well, we need a sketch here, or we need a monologue, or I thought of this monologue, and you write it, but you don't use the capital W word, I'm a writer, because that's what happens is you get boxed off, you get siloed into he's a writer, she's a performer, or she's a writer and he's a performer. But there's no distinction in the Footlights. You're a writer-performer. That's it. You just, what's he going to say? And that gives you longevity in show business. If you can write and you're not afraid to write, and you think of yourself as a writer. It's a psychological trick. You just, because no one's born a writer. You just tell yourself, I'm a writer, so I write. But a lot of people think, oh, I can't write, I'm not a writer. Well, it's nonsense. It's because you haven't. But with Footlights, you get eased into it without noticing. You're suddenly a writer, and you've got pages of material that you've written or typed or whatever. And there it is. So when then you go out into the big world, you're not just going to hope that someone casts you. You can say, well, let's write a show. Let's do our own thing, and that's a huge advantage. And all the huge names in comedy do that. Whether it's Ricky Gervais or some of the other newer generation ones, they write their own shows, whether it's a sitcom or whatever it is. And of course, stand-ups create their own material. Or steal it from others occasionally. You get that in the stand-up world. There's always these rumours about someone, I won't say who, has a nickname which is the thief of bad gags.
I remember that just reminds me of James Gordon. I remember he did this joke about seeing a flyer for guitar lessons and then taking it and shouting around, "Oh, I don't fucking want guitar lessons!" And apparently he stole that joke from Ricky Gervais.
Yes.
And there was this whole controversial about it.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't know if he intentionally did that or if he has a team of writers who do it.
I think, chances were it was a team, but if ever there's a bad story to tell about someone, poor old Corden always gets it. But yeah. So how are the Footlights at the moment? Do have you seen their the current gang, as it were?
Yes. So I was around there the other week. We watched a smokers event. Got talking to all the members there. It was really fun. I really loved it. There's such like a variety there. Like it's very quick. So like one student would go up and have like 5 minutes on stage, and then there'll be the next, and the next, and the next. And it was like this very quick rotation. But because of that, you got to see so much different content, such a wide breadth of it.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. Really liked it.
I think one of the huge advantages now as well is, fortunately, when we came, Emma Thompson was clearly, the great talent of her generation, and also our show was directed by Jan Ravens, who was the first female president of the Footlights. And the days of some of the sort of misogyny that Miriam Margolyes wrote about in her autobiography, I don't know if you've seen it, but she claims she was very badly treated by John Cleese and that generation, and that women were really not welcomed, and they would just, if they weren't a scantily clad, bosomy, girl to come on for some sort of sexist joke, then there's no role for them. And that was different in our time. There was a show called Woman's Hour that Sandy Toksvig and Jan Ravens and Emma Thompson were in, and now, of course, I think it's absolutely equal. And obviously, there have been wonderful people like Olivia Colman and so on, so yeah, it's a very interesting ecosystem within Cambridge, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah. So I know we're coming near to the end now. So just want to ask a final question. What would you say to someone? So what advice would you give to a newcomer of Footlights?
Don't be afraid. Don't. There may be some third years there, and you're a first year, and you think they're absolutely cool and they've got all the answers. They're as scared as you are. Everyone's scared in comedy. Indeed, fear is one of the drivers of comedy. It's it's what audiences relate to as well. Audiences are slightly nervous when they sit down. They don't want to be bored or embarrassed by bad performance. They want to enjoy themselves. So it's the easiest thing in the world to say. The hardest thing to do is to relax into whatever it is. Have confidence in what you're doing. Don't rush it. Take your time, and be honest. Don't lie. I know that sounds weird, but comedy's an art, and all art is about telling the truth. There's nothing worse than a stand-up. It's just, don't you just hate, and you think you don't hate that. You just think it's a funny thing to hate. That's not the same. I know, audiences can smell authenticity with it. It doesn't need special antennae. It's just a human gift. We know bullshit when we hear it or see it. So, if you really do hate something, do a great rant about what you hate, but you really got to mean it. Don't just think it's something that you ought to hate. Be as absolutely honest as you can be, and your persona, if it's a stand-up, should be your own, and it can be magnified, of course, amplified and stretched in different directions. So if you're a nervous, timorous person, you could make that your persona, but in a confident way. If that doesn't sound too weird. Yeah. But it's about relaxing, and above all, make sure if you have a friend or group of friends that you work together, and that you each find what your own talent is, what you're good at, and don't be the bossy one. Again, think of it like a band in that sense. Don't be the one who hogs it all, says, no, I'm doing the lyrics and the songs, whatever. Unless that person is supremely talented and should be the band leader. But find your roles, and and don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid. And if you do laugh at it, go, fuck, that was terrible, rather than feel inadequate, because everybody's bombed. Everybody, without exception, has bombed.
I can imagine as a comedian, you obviously you have to fail, right? You have to go through all the shit shows and shovel a lot of shit with it and acknowledge that failure, and then because if you just ignore the failure, obviously you're not going to grow from it.
Exactly. Right. Exactly right. No question. And also, do learn from your heroes. If you have heroes, see what it is about them. It doesn't mean you imitate them exactly, but that you just, what is it about their posture, about their attitude, about their style that you so admire? And is there something in yourself that you can utilize to give that same, gift to an audience? Because if you're a performer, you want to give pleasure. You don't want the audience to give you pleasure. You don't want to be admired. You just want to, it's like another. Okay, I'm always saying things are like something else, but it's like cooking. The great chefs live for watching that moment of the fork going in the diner's mouth and seeing, are they loving it? They may shout and scream in the kitchen, and they may be, but it's really just all about giving pleasure. And performance is about giving pleasure. It's not about seeking to be admired and clapped on the shoulder and applauded. Of course, it's good to have applause. It's good to have recognition that you have pleased. But it is about pleasing. It's a word Shakespeare uses a lot at the end of his comedies. If we have pleased, and that is your job, to please. And it's a pleasure to please. It's much more a pleasure to please than to be pleased or pleasured. I do talk nonsense, but I think I'm right.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, Stephen Fry, it's been a pleasure.
Sam Melville, is it?
Melvin, yeah.
Melvin, sorry, Sam Melvin.
Yeah, no worries.
Delight to talk to you.